Okay, hello, whoever is going to be watching it. This is going to be our first meeting, and we are going to start discussing the book Power versus Force by David Hawkins. And today we are going to start with chapter number 1. And before that chapter, the book starts with the preface and the introduction, which gives the perspective of where Dr. David Hawkins is coming from and what his experiences were as he was growing up, so since childhood. I think it helps the reader to understand where this research originated from. Maybe we can talk a little bit about how much, who read the book and who didn't read. So
I don't have the book yet.
I read it, but not recently.
It's the same for me. I read it sometime ago.
And I don't remember the stuff still.
I read it some years ago, and it very much resonated with me. I was teaching art appreciation at Coastal College, and I began teaching cultures through the map of consciousness, and found that the students understood it. They started examining their own realities and assumptions.
Nice. So the book actually, in the epilogue, there is an epilogue on the first page, and it says that the skillful are not obvious. They appear to be simple-minded. Those who know this know the patterns of the absolute. To know the patterns is the subtle power. The subtle power moves all things and has no name. So I just like this, the first sentence, the skillful are not obvious. It just means that a true teacher and true master is just like a regular person. It's not different, and it's not going to make himself or herself different from anyone else. This idea stood out to me when I just opened the book, because somebody else shared the same thought. That it's like how to distinguish between the true teacher and different other teachers that maybe not.
That reminds me, because I was recently rereading some of Thich Nhat, how do you pronounce it? Thich Nhat. If you watched his life as he practices it, it would appear simple. Because he is present in everything that he does, whether he's doing dishes or sweeping the floor or working in the garden. And he does it in a very simple way. And yet he's obviously very skilled. But it wouldn't be the way necessarily a society would evaluate.
I had someone ask me one time the difference in the spiritual teachers that he knew I had had. And he said, what separates them? And it took me a week to answer. And then I said, it's the degree of ego that is within them, the degree of personality and ego that is still present. And it seemed to be the, but then I noticed, so when you say it's skillful and not obvious, that really resonates.
So in this book, there are 24 chapters. I think that there is a lot of information in each chapter, even though they're short. There are sometimes 15 pages, not very long chapters, but there is a lot in each of them. So if we want to cover 2 chapters, and you feel like the chapter is lighter, and you want to read 2 for next time, that's fine. But I think we would be able to discuss 1 chapter at a time. So let's look at the preface. So in the preface, Dr. David Hawkins is talking about his experience, and he says that beginning at a very young age, there was a lifelong sequence of intense states of awareness, first inspired and then gave direction to the process of subjective realization that has finally taken form in this book. And then he talks about being agnostic and going away from religion because traditional religion and representation of God didn't resonate with him anymore after the experiences that he had. And he said that on page 11, he says that I had lost religion, but I found spirituality, which is also it was exactly the same for me. That I just didn't find that religion is helpful anymore, and at some point I wanted to experience myself what it is.
So he probably had like an after-death experience in that snowbank.
Yeah, he had some
Yeah,
experience, we can call it.
usually people they get comfortable and then relax and then fall asleep.
There was another, I think the turning point happened when he already had his practice, and that he describes it on page 12 when he had physical challenges, and then he basically said the prayer, even though he was agnostic at that moment. I think he had this desperation, and he said, if there is God, I ask him to help me now. And after that prayer, in the morning he woke up and there was no me, no personality, and that personality didn't come back for, I think he said, for 9 months. And he said that this presence had replaced what had been me, and the body and its actions were controlled solely by the presence's infinite will. What's interesting to me is that, so he says that it was very hard to function at first, but then he was just living with it and following. Basically, his body was guided by the will of God, of infinite, and his practice expanded exponentially. It had thousands. He said that there was 1,000 new patients a year, and etc. There was a huge expansion in the practice. Then he describes how he found kinesiology. So one paragraph that I wanted to look at is on page 21. And it says, it's the second paragraph from top. So it says, people wonder, how does one reach this state of awareness? I can only share my own experience with you and note that few follow the steps because they're so simple. And then he talks about the steps. First, the desire to reach that state was intense. Then came the discipline to act with constant and universal forgiveness and gentleness without exception. One has to be compassionate toward everything, including one's own self and thoughts. And next came a willingness to hold desires in abeyance and surrender personal will at every moment. So I think all of these points are key points in the spiritual journey, because the willingness is the key, and then constant or consistent practice. So every day there is some practice, and he said without exception, being kind and forgiving without exception. Let's look at the chapter. So in the chapter, he's talking about, so he's comparing the human mind to a giant computer that processes a lot of information, the data. And then there is also what he says, this database, a large database. On page 35, he says, in the introduction, he says, the database transcends time, space, and all limitations of individual consciousness. So that database is God, or Spirit, Holy Spirit. So, and we have access to it because we're always connected to this.
Could that be, instead of God, you have the universal consciousness? It's like
it's not even consciousness anymore. So if like what we think is consciousness in words, like in concepts, thinking in concepts, so that's more than our
Universal and beyond individual.
Okay, so I think it's terminology, and however you want to call it. If you like the word consciousness, I don't use consciousness for that because consciousness is based on some concepts and ideas, and here there is no concepts anymore. But if you like that word, that's good. So we are connected to this computer. We are connected to that consciousness. If you want to call it universal consciousness. But then we also have this universe, we also have individual expression of who we are here. So this is going to be explained later, what he means by this and why it's important. And chapter 1 sets the foundation for what is about to come. And he talks about first, like what is kinesiology? That kinesiology is the science that showed the connection between the mind and the body, that they are always in connection and in communication. Which is interesting, I think, because it wasn't known before through the scientific method. And kinesiology shows this. And so David Hawkins set this objective to study human consciousness using the tools of kinesiology. And his objective was, he said that it was to create a map of energy fields of consciousness to describe the different human experiences that we might have.
It's interesting how he came to that through science, because in reading Jacob Lieberman's work, which is on light, but he is a doctor and came to that through studying the eyes, which are part of the brain, and the connections between mind and body, how it's all, everything is totally connected. There's no separation. Mm-hmm. And that we are beings, well, he goes on to say we are beings of light. We receive light and we emit light. But again, through science.
Well, through television last night, the Manifest TV show, they have this thing that certain people have in their head now. And it's, everything is connected. This little 8-year-old boy starts speaking this just off the cuff. And his father can hear the voice in his head. They didn't know that something. This is a plane that disappeared for 5.5 years, and then suddenly shows back up again and causes a lot of turmoil in people's family life and friends and everything. But then they also are doing some good things and they don't know what's going on. The government thinks it's a conspiracy. But everything is connected. It's the thing that, you know, it's like you'd be walking along and suddenly you hear a little music and everything is connected in his head. People would say, well, are you okay? And babies, you know, yeah.
So they're actually tuned into it through awareness.
Something
Where
is speaking.
It probably is available to all of us, but we're not, we don't have an awareness of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are people who do have that extra.
This is what the Course in Miracles calls complete communication, so full communication. So we're always in this communication. We're just not consciously. We might not be aware of it. It's like what the Course is saying. We need to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, but love is connection. So yes, I agree that it's everyone has it. like yesterday I was watching these videos, I was sharing with Sally before that there are two videos on causality on YouTube that David Hawkins has, and I was watching it, and he described it so well that the concept of no cause and effect that the Course is also, of course, Miracles is teaching, it described so well that I just felt that connection with everything, because like everything doesn't have a specific cause. Every other part causes, but we think that this is, I'm here because I walked here, and so linearly we tracked linearly, but actually it's not linear. Everything is simultaneous, happening simultaneously and affecting everything. So it's more like, I think energy or frequency is described as a these are good symbols for what happens.
Science has shown for years, we've studied like animal behavior, and birds and bees and ants and everything. And we've known that they have a collective mind because of the way they interact and move, like birds when they migrate. And they all, like thousands of birds, and we used to think that there was a leader, but there actually isn't. They're in the same frequency. Science now has proven that the human has that same innate, system, in that we are connected, but we have blocked that connection.
Mhm.
And psychics in some people have been able to go into that dimension, but for most of us, it's still a closed door.
You just shared the same example that David Hawkins was using
Really?
with birds, because he said that when we look at the flocks of birds, it seems like they're following each other, but they're not. They're not following, they're just following. Each bird is individually guided. Each bird is connected and individually connected to God, basically to that consciousness of collective.
Like they're all cells in the same body, but then that body is connected to all the cells in the universe. So,
and it looks beautiful, it looks harmonious, just because they're all each tuned in completely. And people also have this ability. It's just our mind, the other part of our mind, the ego, is intervening, and it's like interference, and it can be taking us off course. At least we think so, but we are never off. We can never be off. So then Dr. Hawkins talks about attractors. Attractors that are defined as identifiable pattern that emerges from a seemingly unmeaningful mass of data. So it seems like there is no coherence, but actually there is if you look at it. So it reminded me of the concept of synchronicity somewhat. And I like looking at the events in people's life, in my own life, and seeing these patterns. And attractors are these patterns that emerge from a mass of data. And another concept is a field of dominance, which is just saying that there is higher level information that guides lower levels. An important concept here in this chapter is causality. So these are sections, different sections in chapter 1. Attractors, fields of dominance, critical point analysis, and then causality. So causality, I think, is a key concept. We just talked about causality already, and it's usually we think in linear terms that A causes B, and then B causes C. So it goes step by step, and it's like our life progresses linearly on this linear time frame. But in fact, in reality, it's not linear. It's more complex, or it's not linear.
which
Maybe
takes
not
us
complex,
to
but
time
just
and
not linear.
space, because it's outside of time and space. We've just created time and space with our definitions, a way to describe this illusion.
So we think that A is causing B, but in fact there is another cause that is it's what we can call just the source or cause. and it's guiding everything, A, B, and C simultaneously. So I think it helps to know that, and I think it's really important to just reflect on it, meditate on it. I think it's a concept that we can actually spend time reflecting on.
What if it has anything to do with dark matter?
What do you mean?
He talks about the invisible, implicant, and the manifest, explicant.
Mm-hmm.
And then outgoing postulates a source of beyond both the explicant and implicant realms, very much like the state of pure awareness. And most of the universe, as they're saying now in physics, is dark matter.
Okay.
Dark matter is like 80% of the universe, but we don't know anything about dark matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another symbol. I think it's actually, if it's so I think it's thinking about it makes us question, what do we believe? So what is actually true? Maybe the dark matter is what is true actually. So it's like we always live there, but we don't know. We think there is we think there is the stable and it's solid and there is somebody created it, but actually it was just came here from dark matter because there was a potential for it.
I read something the other day that they're re-examining dark matter because, and I didn't get to the point that I understood what they were talking about, but that they have misjudged what they think it is.
I don't know. I don't know much about the science of this. I just the idea of no time and space is like a portal, openness. So that's a good symbol for connection to this pure awareness. Because when we are in this space of, in the state where we don't connect to a space or time, we can easily get to the pure awareness. So visible phenomena are caused by pure awareness, or what he also somebody called it implicate or invisible. And then there are events that are caused by it, but we think they are caused by other visible phenomena, which cannot be true. And then he says that this attractor patterns, this idea or concepts of attractor patterns, these are patterns in the mass of data, in the mass of information, and these patterns are like qualities of consciousness. So they are not specific to anyone in particular, to any one person, but they are qualities. So I think it's later he's going to talk about qualities for a specific states of consciousness, and they are universal for everyone. So it's not just it's not individual at that level. Then he starts talking about the levels here, and he says that on page 52 he talks about calibration. And so he talks about calibration of consciousness levels that he did with kinesiology. And so he calibrated levels of consciousness on a scale from 1 to 1000. And says that the majority of humans experience the levels below 600. And then there is non-ordinary evolution that happens not for many yet, and that's the levels above 600, from 600 to 1000, and this is what we call the enlightened people, and these are the highest spiritual states.
It's interesting, the law of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. I had an experience where it says over time it can produce a profound change, much as a ship who's 1 degree off, because of the work that I've done with the Navy. And their ships, their submarines, well, it's true of an airplane too. that if they are an nth of a degree off course, they can end up at a place where they have not intended to go. And which makes it even more scary when they're sending missiles or sending bombs. I mean, those are all calibrated, but if they're off by a fraction, then they will miss the intended target. And that's something that I then applied to, in the work that I was doing, to our own lives. That we can think we're on course, but if we're slightly off, either, you know, as a parent and management style, I mean, whatever, in our relationships. And there's an internal, I guess that's where I was trying to take this, there's an internal knowingness, but we often block it and we don't recognize that we're off course and that it's making a difference. Where if we're tuned into that internal awareness, I'm going to call it, we're able to stay the course because we are calibrated. He's talking about calibrating instruments and as an example, and I think he's also saying that we are calibrated if we're tuned into it. We're calibrated by the source.
Yeah, it's interesting that there are. So he said that there is the sequential patterns, and we can shift. Basically, there are points where there is a shift. There are shifts, and one of these points in the calibration was 200, because below 200 it's destruction or weakening. It's also another similarity to A Course in Miracles, where the Course talks a lot about power, and coming back to your power, the true power of who we are, but that before this new identity becomes fully established, and we can still fluctuate, and then when we believe that we are small body, this body, then it's weak state of mind. It's weak, and in David Hawkins's terminology, this would be below 200, and it's weak or negative power, basically.
There are 85% of the population exists below 200.
During his life, what he calibrated during his life, it changes.
It's changed.
Sure, it changed. I mean, we're growing, but it's not changing fast. I calibrated it as well, but it's changing really slowly. So we are a little bit above 200, but it's not like changing from 200 to 500.
Yeah, so I think he said the average was 1.
But just to get above 200 is a group consciousness is huge.
It is.
Because it goes into the positive, into courage instead of the negative.
Yes. So as a collective, we are just a little bit about 200 on average right now. But it's, I mean, we are evolving. We are still babies, but we're evolving. So what else is interesting? So this power, so let's say below 200, we are in weaker states, and then we come into power, and courage begins to emerge, and that's just a little bit about 200. And then he says that above 600, the power is enormous. I think it's very encouraging to think about this, how enormous is our potential, and we can connect to that energy as well. This is who we are. If you think about no time, that's who we are right now in this time.
So everybody, this is like overall consciousness, but you can go up to higher levels temporarily. raise your consciousness temporarily, and it sort of sits back to your normal average level.
We always shift throughout the day. We shift in our states of consciousness, and so we have low points and high points of the day. And I think being close to people who are of higher level, and that's why I like watching the videos, like the videos of David Hawkins and other, and being in groups like our group, it helps to raise that level on average for the whole group. I think that's the power of working in groups overall. But of course, like there are different groups. If I go to, like, I don't know, to the bar, maybe it's going to be not very high level, or it will be, depends who is there at the moment. But on average. So I want to show you a couple of videos on these concepts. There is a short video on attractors.
We said evolution, as it appears in physicality, is the reflection of that which has occurred on the level of consciousness. It's on the level of consciousness that form evolves into the forms that we see as life on Earth. The form can then be optionally energized by energies on the other side. You might, let's say, for convenience of speech, on the other side. Can opt to be the life energy within that form. That form has a central, you remember in power versus force, we talked about attractor fields. In the nonlinear domain of what appears as chaos, multiple orange kitties all over the planet, there is essential attractor field of orange kittiness. We could even draw it if we had a computer. This is an attractor field. Nature draws attractor fields for you all the time. All you have to do is fly in a plane and look at the formation of the earth below you and the vegetation. As you watch, there's a beautiful series of videos on right now, or TVs on now, called The Deep Blue. What is it, Deep Blue? Yeah. Underwater, a magnificent series on the History Channel, I think it's Discovery Channel. Anyway, incredible beauty, the incredible beauty at the depth of the sea, stunning creatures. So stunningly beautiful, you just suck in your breath, you go, that's existing 5,000 feet down in the dark. Ooh, gorgeous, radiance, beautiful. But you see the schools of fish wheeling as though they're one, like this. You see the whole tens of thousands of fish, all in the design like this. You see the same thing with the birds taking off. They all go like this. Well, the presumption of the ego, which believes in causality, is that this bird is flying like a squadron of fighters this many feet from this one. It thinks that these birds are following this bird's and causing these. So actually what's happening, these birds are not following each other at all. These birds are being controlled by an attractor field in the invisible domain. Each bird is uniquely controlled by the same attractor field. And that's why they line up. They're not following each other at all. So when you see the birds wheeling like that, that's the demonstration of the attractor field, which is in the invisible domain becoming manifest in a flock of birds in flight. That's stunningly obvious in this series of Deep Blue. You see 5 million minnows all turning as one in the shine of light as they swing. They swing like one being in thousands and thousands of bodies simultaneously. That's the attractor field. The animal gods of the Native Americans, the many gods of the Hindu pantheon, all represent to me symbolic, those are the attractor fields. In other words, there is central to all orange kittiness the essence of that which makes orange kittiness, and it radiates out what looks to perception as individual separate orange kitties, but there's only one orange kittiness radiating out. You understand what I'm saying? So the essence of each genus and species then exists on the invisible domain and actualizes within the physical.
This was the attractor on the attractor fields, and then there is another video on causality that is really good.
We want to talk about causality because eventually spiritual awareness has to do with understanding the nature of creation, the nature of God, because they go hand in hand in a way. And one of the major blocks that keeps people in the 400s and keeps them from evolving is a misunderstanding of the word, the concept of causality. I think I did speak about it in our power versus force, but I want to go into it a little more differently. Certain bits of information have a great value. Just to have heard it, to get it, jumps you ahead enormously. So usually you wait till the students are very advanced and then you present these concepts. I say, heck, let's put them right in the beginning because the information itself already is transformative. All right, so we want to look through the illusion of causality because causality creates a perceptual block that you cannot see what is actually going on, and you cannot really experience the presence of God in a way. It's a great blockade. The Newtonian paradigm, the world of the ego, the world of the intellect, the way the ego is structured, sees this causing of that. The whole paradigm of our society is based on this causes of that. The Supreme Court upholds it. Scientists verify it. It's built into the language. The newspaper headlines say it. The movies reveal it. It's all prevailing in our society. Consequently, becoming enlightened in this world is difficult because the mind, the ego, feelings, you're barraged continuously around the clock by a paradigm of reality which is based on duality. There's always a this causing a that. The whole judicial system. I was standing on a street corner and there was an accident and that gave me a heart attack. Right. The court agrees. Here's $500,000. Insurance company pays, we all pick up. So this paradigm of causality, the courts have now spread so extreme. So you see how bizarre. So our society becomes so bizarre because everything is assumed to be a cause. The minute you say something is a cause, you imply that it's a fault. It's a fault. It's a fault. If the earth is warming, somebody's fault. So now causality is a very important roadblock. It's a major roadblock. It's practically nobody gets beyond the 400s. In our society, what percent get beyond the 400s? 490, the intellect is the great block. And the reason it's such a great block, it's structured, its whole basis is causality. There's always a this causing a that. That's a dualistic perception. That's called dualism. A this and a that. That's why we try to wipe out duality when it comes to the map of consciousness. There's no good and evil there. It's all a gradation. There's no opposites. There's a this causing a that. What we did in explaining how we were going to prove the map of consciousness is applicable to all seeming dualities. In a duality, there's only one variable, and it goes like this, from intense to less intense. There are not two variables. There is not two variables, good versus evil, hot versus cold. Cold is not the opposite of hot. Hot has no opposite. Heat is either there or not there, but that doesn't make it its opposite. Electricity is either in the wire or it is not in the wire. Electricity doesn't have an opposite called no electric. You can't send no electricity down a wire. You can only send electricity. This is the whole key. If you just get what I'm saying today, it advances your consciousness enormously. Things are more or less one variable. There are not two variables. How much absence of love must there be before your perception would say, well, that's evil? That depends, right? Most of the world right now would say that love is evil, but I'm sure there's a lot of Islamic zealots that consider him a hero, right? So you're always dealing with only an arbitrary perception. So the world of duality then is the product of an arbitrary positionality. An arbitrary positionality. There is no this causing a that. That is all a bizarre illusion. There is the unfoldment of the universe as it proceeds thusly. If we look for a cause, let's take cause as far as we can in the logical world. For a speck of dust to be right where it is, there it is right there. See that speck of dust? Anyway, that speck of dust. That's all in your head. There's no speck of dust. For this speck of dust, what causes this piece? Just take something simple, a speck of dust. We're not talking about the whole industrial complex or the political structure of the states or something. We're just talking about one little lousy piece of dust. For this little piece of dust to be here, what is the cause? Well, the cause would be, it would depend on the barometric pressure today. It would depend on the movement of the air in this room, which would depend on the temperature, which would depend on how many people are here, and the dimensions of the room would also depend. For a room to be here, there has to be a land, there has to be a state for a county to be in. There has to be a planet for that to be on. That planet is not alone in the universe. It's got to be whirling around with other universes. And for the planet to be where it is, so that this state can be where this county is, where this building is, where these air currents are, and all these people are, and the speaker here pointing his finger up in the air, that's all due to the evolution of all of preceding time, is it not? All of preceding time had to evolve for all the planets to be where they are, for the universe to be where it is, so that this state can be this place on the globe at this point in time, where this barometric pressure and the atmospheric pressure and these temperatures and gradations and this light coming down and making little air currents and the breath from my speaking voice. There's an infinite number of finite causes, right? Acting in concert throughout all of time. All of time has to have occurred up to the moment for this little speck. Now you go to court and tell me who you're going to sue. This idiot had to eat a lousy diet for a lot of years to be standing there in the street corner and get knocked over by just a loud noise of an accident. You know what I mean? What about, what's he been eating for 66 years and he's so loaded with so much cholesterol? And why does he overreact with all that adrenaline? I mean, when something, a loud noise goes off near me, I don't even respond to it. That happens about 600. You suddenly stop responding to loud noises. I don't know why. They're just in the periphery. Anyway, they don't affect you because you is everywhere that is. So it's not a threat. Oh, I see why. Because you're not in a specific place. So therefore, yeah, you're not going to attack them. Anyhow, we want to get rid of causality. The cause, even within the linear domain of anything, is the totality of all that is throughout all of time. That is the cause of anything.
Very interesting.
There's another video that is called Causality. You can find it by just typing Causality, David Hawkins, and if it's not this one, then there's the second one. It's also very good. I think this concept is really important. Like he said, it takes us out of the linear thinking, and also takes us out of judgment and blame, because he said that if we think that something causing anything, that means that there is something to blame, or like if it's cold right now, it's because something happened, or it's because of global warming. It's all ideas. It's just, there is what it is what it is, and to create this, a lot of things came together. So it gave me, listening to this video gave me the appreciation, just gratitude for any moment, because it's any moment has everything in it. Everything.
Cause
And
also,
that's-
we ascribe to the other side of things, which would be good things, you know. Someone causes me to be happy. I got a pay raise. I'm thrilled. So we ascribe cause to everything on the spectrum. It isn't just things that are negative, but we have to look for a reason for something to be the way it is instead of letting it be the way it is.
And even another person, we can say, we can also apply it to a person. There is no reason to love a person. It's just because we are that, and everything is in us. We are already complete, and that's beautiful. And so I think it's a very open-minded ideas to think that way. And so we started with this, with causality. It's not like David Hawkins said just right now, it's not an easy concept, or it doesn't come naturally to us just because we learned so many times. They were repeated in school and everywhere. So we learned to think in terms of cause and effect, even though it's not in our, I don't think it's in our best interest. But that was basically, that was chapter 1. Do we have any final thoughts about anything?
I looked in the index. I didn't see a chapter reference to causality. He said he talked about it in the book.
It's one of the sections in chapter 1, causality, when it says A, B, C.
Oh, that.
So it's page 49.
Okay, so it's not another. He doesn't talk about it again.
I don't know.
It's
I
mentioned,
don't
it's
remember.
mentioned throughout, but
Yeah.
that's the major time that he gets to it.
So chapter 2 is going to be history and methodology, historical background and the testing procedure. It's a very short section. So for next time, it's actually 10 pages. So for next time, we can look at 2 sections, because from my background, I worked with kinesiology, and I know how it works, so that's not going to be very new to me, but I will look at chapter 3. And chapter 3 has a map of consciousness. Chapter 4 starts with describing different levels of consciousness. I think here we can spend more time, maybe. We'll see. So,
We were talking about this morning. I just jumped to page 96. We must also realize that much of the remainder of the world population, civilized as well as primitive, lives primarily in fear. The majority of humans spend their lives in a quest for one form of security or another. And we're talking about that, how like political tactics now are all based on trying to get people to be more fearful to then go to somebody's point of view in politics. And I don't think most people realize that they're being manipulated.
Because that is something that we learned growing up. We've been afraid of our parents often because of discipline, or harsh discipline. We've been afraid of our teachers. We've been afraid in our churches of our ministers,
of our bosses at
of
work.
our bosses.
So
So
authority.
it just translates. The older we get, we take those memories, which is what Dr. Len talked about, and keep reapplying it to every situation.
It's also, in some way, it's actually a paradox, but it's in some way it's safe to think in the old style, like in an old conventional way, it gives some
It's
illusion of
comfortable.
safety or
Yeah,
comfort.
it's, yeah, it's because it's the way you've always thought.
Right.
You've always done it this way, always been fearful. But, yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, it was nuclear bomb shelters. And in Michigan, tornadoes, we had drills in elementary school, you hide underneath your desk, but it's not really happening at all. And now it's terrorist attacks. There's always something going on for little kids. When I was a kid, Halloween was fun. Nobody ever, there was no danger at all. Kids would went out loose. Now you have to be accompanied by an older person, an adult. And you have to look at your bag, and it's all fear-based.
It can be changed, and it can be changed from childhood. It begins with parents, and we can teach children differently. That we can teach children this concept that there is actually no causality. What happens to you is determined by all, by everything, which is God. Actually, it's all. So I think it's liberating if we raise this new generation of children that way. Then gradually, of course, they will learn partially from parents, and then part of it will be still from the society. But over several generations, we can increase our level of consciousness a lot.
I think as a parent and having had parents, one of the most effective ways that I learned, because I was blessed with good teachers, was that of learning to make my own choices, to be independent. I mean, I often said of my children when they were young, the one gift I wanted to give them, because I felt it had been given to me, was to be confident enough to have independent thoughts and act independently based on certain values, but not on necessarily what some authority was saying. That, I was taught that in here intrinsically, and when you haven't followed your heart.
It's a huge gift to give a child early on, even to give an adult that permission. You can be whatever you want to a partner in relationship. I'm thinking that I'm trying to create the same, like when with honor. Some people say that you're very independent of each other because it's not standard normally, but we do have our own lives and space also.
But look at the gift that you bring to each other,
Yeah,
because
we give freedom to each
you
other.
have those things to share.
Yeah, and we do appreciate each other for this,
Yeah.
because he says that that's why I value our relationship, because I know that there are, in relationships it's always like this smothering or like merging together so much you don't have your own. So that's one example. But I I would love to see our world erasing every child like you described, giving the freedom of independent thought. And also that stability that comes from values, because without values, that independence can be, or with wrong values, it can go.
And those values are best taught through modeling, through use, through the parent, through the teacher, whoever is actually living those values. You can't tell the child to do it one way and they watch you do it another. They learn very quickly that that's not right.
I was in my late 40s before I met somebody that made me feel like I was okay. And that was Marion Starnes. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot, and still have a lot, to
Undo.
So that idea of completely, continually cleansing is very much. And when we get to the map of consciousness, sometimes he says that you very seldom move from one area to another in a lifetime. But I would have to say that in the way I operate, I think I've jumped many levels.
Because you worked at it, you
Yeah.
cared,
Yes,
you
yes.
cared, you,
I've read everything, I've taken every opportunity. So I know it's possible. And what helped the students when I was showing them the map of consciousness and showing that, if I'm not getting too far ahead, was I would show where addiction was, and where fear and shame and humiliation was. And I would say, okay, now if you start using drugs to numb out your shame or anything at age 14, then suddenly you are 24 and people are saying, why don't you act your age? And it's because you kept numbing out instead of having another growth experience that allowed you to raise your consciousness, your awareness of self, your ability to make different choices. And that's why you get stuck. And I was stuck for a long time. And then when I started climbing and recognized how it worked, I was very hungry by then. That's when I found A Course in Miracles as well. And A Course in Miracles, Power versus Force, The Seat of the Soul. When I read The Seat of the Soul, I realized I was multisensory, that I wasn't crazy. And I started finding the things that affirmed, hey, and that lets you climb.
validated.
Yeah, and it helps you climb. You find another authority, another voice
That's
that
like
you can believe in.
in that African rites passage where one of the things they say is you can always go back and fetch it. And I like that. I like that so much because it's like just because you didn't get that at 14 or because they kind of look at life in 7-year increments, you can always go back and fetch what you missed and come forward. Doesn't matter chronologically how old you are. And I think that's a wonderful gift to give, particularly teenagers and adolescents who are feeling that they're lost.
And the science says that you make your body every 7 years, every cell in your body. And that's the foundation for Jitsu for chronic problems. If you can hang in there for 7 years and don't die, then you can reverse anything.
That's interesting, that 7-year concept and how it crosses cultures and traditions and
That's the concept of marriages too.
7-year itch.
Yeah,
Yeah, cycles. Okay, so then with
well,
this,
I'm glad that
we'll
you read the
conclude.
chapter because obviously we didn't. Next time, I will read chapters 2 and 3.
Yeah, they should be easy for all of us because they are shorter. I mean, there was a lot of information in the introduction and preface, but this I think we can come back to that material because it's his life, and looking at it periodically, we can just revisit it.
And again, I'm struck at how parallel these paths are.
Oh, yes.
And all these conversations in the books I'm reading.
Yes.
They're all so parallel. The language may be a little different, the tradition may be a little different, but
And that's important.
they're all headed for the light.
You may like one more than another, or you may hear it 100 times in various ways, and you finally get it. The book Who Dies by Stephen Levine. He's a poet, but he writes a book on, and I would underline. So I would underline stuff as illustrate the whole chapter, and I went back and read some of the chapters. It's like, wait a minute. He said the same thing here and here and here and here. He said it a different way. He said the same thing over and over again. Because you just look at it this way, and then you look at it this way, and then you look at it this way, and finally, maybe you get it. Just say it so many different ways. But if
And
you say the
different-
same thing over and over again, you may not get it.
Different authors, different speakers have different styles,
Yeah.
you know, different, but you use a different language, but it's.
Also maybe different levels of consciousness, and working with these levels of consciousness, and I know that if it resonates with me, then it's a reminder that I can understand right now, and it's helpful, and I don't know how it's not necessarily that we need to read. So let's say let's imagine like this, I'm at the level of 300 and somebody is at 800, and this person is not necessarily going to speak to me at 300, but if it's somebody is 350 or 400, they will be more, they may be a better teacher right now. So that's why we have different teachers throughout life, and different books that resonate. Also, how they say it can be because we are taught in
And we were
different
talking about that earlier today about Joe Vitale and how he is able to express to
Commoners.
to people that haven't done all of the
Yeah.
work
Yeah. He can
in a
he can
language
translate it. Yeah.
that is very clear
Because his interviews,
and direct.
you could misunderstand or just not get a lot of what he was saying. The two interviewers,
Mhm.
they were asking questions and he was saying, well, let me rephrase that and look at that in a different way, because he couldn't really answer the question because they didn't get it.
because the
Words
questions
like
were not like
intention,
what he
you know,
was
he said, I don't
thinking.
deal with intention.
You know?
You know, he said he doesn't deal with intention. Intention doesn't exist. It's programmed. You know, so
It's
he's
like I asked the question once. So when we ask this in the initial stages, the questions are coming from the ego. But just because the ego is like getting anxious, and that anxiety and fear produces questions that are not questions, they are statements of wrong ideas. And so I was at a retreat with David Hofmeister, and at the end of 2 days, I was like holding for that question. I was afraid to ask. People were talking, and then at the end, I said, okay, this is my last chance in the last 5 minutes to ask a question. And so I asked him, and the question was, how did it all happen? How did we end up here? And now I'm laughing at this question because many people are asking me this question, and there is no answer because it's a statement that we got here, really, that it really happens, that we are in a state that is like doomed, and it's actually not true. We can see it, but at that point it seems like it is true and we are doomed. And so how did we get here? The answer, he actually said that it never happened. That was the essence of that question. It gave me so much peace. I said, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because it cannot have happened. It doesn't make sense that we are like abandoned here alone. And then also the causality, removing the causality makes us, it just proves that we are never alone. We cannot be alone, we are connected to everything. So that also removes loneliness completely.
Yeah, that's why I commented on that TV show Manifest, because they're throwing some really, these people all seem to be connected by something, but they don't know what it is. The show hasn't explained that at all. But they're doing good things, going and rescuing, a couple of girls locked up in an enclosure that they've been looking for, and they just seem to know where they are, and they don't know why, but they get led there. And this last one was everything was connected, and so it's like spiritual concepts coming more and more into regular ABC, CBS TV shows. It's just, and then the other one, God Friended Me, is one that's on now. You haven't heard that one? That's one that I've been watching with this guy who's got a radio show. He's an atheist. His father is a minister, and they just don't get along well at all right now. He's got a radio show, and all of a sudden on Facebook, he gets a request for friending from God. Initially, he just throws him away, who's me. He finally says accept, and then every show is where he's led to get involved with help somebody. And,
That's an interesting concept.
yeah, and he's trying to, he and his buddy are trying to figure out where the, who this guy is. How did he set up this account?
So I think we can stop our recording.
Start watching some.
So thank you, everyone. We're gonna stop.